Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in BC. His website, icba.ca. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Jordan, one of the silliest rules I've seen with the latest COVID crackdown in British Columbia, pubs and restaurants can serve you outdoors with a patio. That's fine in BC because we have fine spring weather quite often. But they also brought in a provision, if your pub doesn't have full food service, you can't serve anybody outdoors. In other words, go bankrupt, buddy. Is that the silliest thing you ever heard? Is there any proof that serving full meal deals prevents COVID?
I'm not an epidemiologist, but I would say it feels counterintuitive for sure. Any of us who have been in a restaurant in the past few months has seen the plexiglass, seen the mask, seen the very careful steps that have been taken. In fact, I'd argue that you're probably safer in a restaurant than you are, at Walmart or in other places like that. Like, there's just so many more little bubbles within the restaurant. I'm not going to say it's the silliest rule, simply because there have been a lot of head-scratching moments this past year. Playgrounds being closed, for example, tennis courts being closed. All sorts of weird things have happened. But the bigger problem here is, like, I think restaurants would be willing, if there was scientific evidence and the public health order came down, I think restaurants would go along with it a lot more willingly if they felt like the science was being followed, that their efforts were being recognized, and that they were being talked to ahead of time. Again, we had this situation where the government makes a knee-jerk decision, no communication, no collaboration with the folks actually in the industry, and all of a sudden, restaurants are having to lay people off for 3 weeks. They're having to, food's going to spoil. They're quickly trying to get patios up and running again if they can, but even then the rules are strange. So really unfair to these restaurant owners. Yet again, they're bearing the brunt for a problem that may or may not be of their own creating.
And I look at the religious front. They were just told a couple of weeks ago you can be open for the Christian faith. Easter's probably, and Christmas are their two most important dates. And so 2 weeks ago you were told it's okay if you follow the social distancing rules. And again, not even a week before Easter, off you go. You can't do it again. And I'm sure families had planned to get together in worship.
Well, I mean, churches certainly were planning, how to facilitate that. And it's not just, Christians. I mean, Vaisakhi, very important to the Sikh
exactly.
faith.
But I was just using one example.
Passover, for the Jewish faith. Like, this is a big religious time of year. And for the second straight year, you're asking not just, the worshipers to sacrifice. You're asking these houses of worship to sacrifice yet again. And you're right. 2 weeks ago, there's all this puffed up talk. We're on the right track. You start hanging out with people outside in groups of 10, blah, blah, blah. And then, almost predictably, the weather turns cold. People are inside and it starts to spread again. So it's head scratching what the plan is here. There's so many mixed signals. I don't blame people for being confused. And I think we've come to a point where most of us, after 13 months in this outbreak, in this pandemic, have come to manage our own risks ourselves. Like, we understand what risks we're willing to take and what risks we're not. There's personal responsibility. People may be not broadcasting it as much because they don't want to get shamed on social media, especially like that was happening in the early days of the pandemic. But most people have settled into some kind of routine based on the risks as they identify them, and that's probably okay.
Also, the numbers were much the same 3 weeks ago when they started opening things up. Why the change now? And why does the BC government consistently surprise people with their announcements? At least Doug Ford has been saying for quite some time now, don't expect to get together for Easter. So people in Ontario know, let's not expect to do that. In BC, it's always out of the blue.
Oh, exactly. I mean, they shut down Whistler Blackcomb. They didn't shut down any other mountain, but Whistler Blackcomb they shut down. And some of the folks in the media who are very, some of the ones who are deep apologists for Dr. Bonnie and don't think she can do anything wrong, try to defend it saying, well, Whistler Blackcomb knew it was coming or they should know it's coming because they've seen the numbers spike, blah, blah, blah. But Whistler Blackcomb's, president, the person in charge was like, this is totally out of the blue for us. We had no idea it was coming. Total surprise. No one picked up the phone. The mayor of Whistler seemed like he was out of the loop. They're not doing the spade work in communicating with these folks before they make the decision. And I think that's what's frustrating. We saw with the AstraZeneca rollout for 55 to 65-year-olds in the last couple of days. They just suddenly announced in an afternoon, 55 to 65-year-olds, go to your local pharmacy, you'll be able to get a shot. And guess what? The pharmacies get deluged with phone calls, and these poor pharmacists are picking up the phone going, we've never heard of this, we don't know what the supply is, I don't know what you're talking about. And, now it turns out it's maybe 150 pharmacies across, the region, hardly every pharmacy, hardly every local pharmacy. All those spots are booked up, which is great, but at the same time, some of them were booked up even before, the official website was up with the place to book them. So lots of weird stuff going on. They've got to do a better job of talking to folks, laying some track before they just start making these decisions. I just don't believe that, you couldn't have, over that weekend, picked up the phone and called the president of Whistler, called the mayor, called the restaurant association, and had a conversation with them and say, listen, we're thinking of this. This is where we're headed. We don't want to do it, but we have to do it for public health. And, maybe you could start, quietly getting ready.
And in communities that have proven to be hot spots, the government has had mass immunizations. If Whistler is a hot spot and it's a small population, why not offer vaccinations there?
Totally. And you're talking about,
a few hundred people.
Yeah, a few hundred people. And it's a hot spot because, lots of those seasonal workers live together because it's expensive to live in Whistler. So, it's not uncommon to have 4, 6, 8, 10 kids I call them kids because I'm 45 now, so I'm old. But, to have those youngsters, to have young people living together in tight quarters. So, yeah, treat it like a work camp and go up there and vaccinate them. I mean, Whistler it's almost like its own little island. I mean, it's landlocked, obviously, but, you got to drive to get there or to leave there. You could create this little area. It's so important for the BC economy. It's important for people's mental health to get outdoors. It's important to, if you're worried about the spread, well, like you said, they're young, they're living in close proximity due to conditions that they don't have control over. They don't set
and also, what about day skiers who drive up there, ski? Because I don't think sitting on a chairlift where you're well spaced away from people and then coming down the biggest vertical drop in North America, you're not, even on a crowded day when you have to line up at the lift, once you're on the mountain, you're on your own pretty well. You hardly see any skiers, and yet there could be 1,000 people up there.
Yeah, well, you just manage it through reservations. 4-hour windows or whatever whatever it works best.
Well, I find it so disappointing that we're a year into this. You'd think some lessons would have been learned by now. And do you think now we're seeing some of these knee-jerk things where it seems these decisions are made overnight with no consultation? Would Horgan have done so well if he called a snap election now?
Well, this will be interesting. Is it actually starting to weigh down? For a long time, there was this holier-than-thou attitude that Canada was better than the U.S. in dealing with this, and BC was better than the rest of Canada. But I think most of us now realize, those were early days. We were much luckier than we were good. And we had some conditions that worked to our benefit. And now, we have a rate that's second or third highest, transmission rate highest in Canada. Canadians have fallen, not just slightly behind, but miles behind the United States as far as vaccination goes. It's not uncommon now to hear of Canadians who, those Canadians who are wealthy enough to own property in the States, they're going down there basically to check on their property, but also to live there for a couple of weeks and get 2 shots. And, it's crazy. So, I don't know. My friend McLean Kay for the Orca wrote an interesting piece on some of this controversy. And he mentioned Dr. Bonnie's book, that came out and talking about the early days of the COVID response. And his point was, it feels a little bit like a book about the Super Bowl that was written at halftime. Like we don't know how this is all going to end yet, and it may turn out that things, ratchet down, the circuit breaker works, we're back to, I guess realistic levels, whatever that floor is. Hotter, warmer weather should, definitely help curb the spread as we saw last year. But at the same time, it sure is frustrating living in the moment, that's for sure.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Bateman Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Bateman's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at batemanresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, President Biden has just announced his $3 trillion infrastructure program, the announcement made in Steeltown, Pittsburgh, maybe deliberately because Pittsburgh used to be the heart of the steelmaking business in the U.S. Now America has to get their steel from Canada. Is there any concern with their Buy America policy that Canadian businesses will be frozen out here? And more importantly, for the construction business here in British Columbia, will this radically drive up the cost of construction because of a shortage of materials?
Yeah, well, shortage of materials is a big problem for sure. Housing prices continue to go up, for new housing because of construction costs, but also because of the red tape the government's later on. Anytime you hear the Americans talk about buying American first, that should send chills down the spines of Canadians because, we're obviously their largest trading partner. And if they start to focus on, more internal capacity rather than, buying our supplies, buying our goods, that's bad for whatever part of the Canadian economy you're talking about. It's a hard one. It's one of the reasons why it sort of perplexed me that, so many people rush to the Biden bandwagon, in Canada. Like, I get it, certainly, more stable than his opponent was, but at the same time, his policies weren't necessarily good for Canada. And that's the lens that I kind of look at this through. So, to answer your question, yeah, construction costs continue to be stretched. There's a little bit of an offset in labor costs right now, just a slight one, simply because construction companies are not as busy as they once were. So there's a few more tenders, or a few more bids on every tender, which does help control a little bit of the labor side costs. But the bottom line is, if it costs you more to get that project approved, if it costs you more to get the wood or the steel or the other supplies, the lighting to go into it, the glass, those costs will continue to go up and up and up.
In Canada, they say people are moving out of big cities like Vancouver and Toronto. They want more space. They want a single-family home because they have found working at home with somebody on your lap doing something else for their boss just doesn't work out. And I find that in my own situation where I have an office, but my wife does stuff online for her career as a writer. And so I have to make sure my office door is closed now. It's before I used to keep it open because it's more comfortable and the air gets through. So what can we do in Canada to make those single-family homes more affordable? Do we have to approve more housing? It's not like Canada. I know Vancouver is pinched in with the ocean, mountains, and the border. It's a unique situation. But for the rest of Canada, you've got the second largest nation in the world to expand into.
Yeah, it's some interesting points there. You're right. A while back I was talking to a very prominent realtor. This is before the pandemic. And, his advice was, look, if you want a single family home, buy it now because they're not making any more of them. And so that means they're not going to get much cheaper. And you look at Langley, where I live, 20 years ago, the vast majority of housing starts were single-family homes. The Walnut Grove area where I live, all through, just single-family was the preferred housing form. That has radically changed. Now, even in Langley, which people would consider a suburban community, the vast majority are condos or townhouses. Some row houses, but definitely multifamily. The same is happening in Abbotsford. This is why people are moving all the way to Chilliwack, for example, into places like Sardis and Garrison Landing, and in and around downtown Chilliwack, because they can get that little patch of land to go with their home. They can live in that single-family spot. But, how far can they go? Can they go to Hope? Or, are they going to go, past Squamish? It's a long way out now, if you're city-centric. So, yeah, the pandemic is an interesting, phenomenon because of the work-from-home issues, and, there still seems to be a real mix among the scholars as to what they think will happen post-pandemic. Will people work a day or two from home? Will more people work from home completely? It is very much up in the air, and I think you may see, it may just depend on the industry. But yeah, single-family homes aren't going to get cheaper. They are, expensive to service, for municipalities. Municipalities, especially in the Lower Mainland, are confined by the ocean, the border, the mountains, and the agricultural land reserve. So they are trying to, squeeze in as many people as possible into the developable land that they're allowed to build on. And the only way to do that is to build multifamily. I guess it's probably evergreen advice, but, if you want a single-family home, I guess now is the time to get it, because they're not going to make many more of them.
Well, my solution, and I haven't really floated this out officially to anybody, and of course they wouldn't reply to me because I asked tough questions if they're government officials, but if you have abandoned office blocks downtown, well, either make them residential, and we know you can do that because it did that with the old BC Hydro building downtown successfully, or how about vertical farming? Make a trade if you're a real estate developer. I get to build some new housing in this agricultural land reserve, but those office towers I own downtown that are basically empty, I will turn those into vertical farms and replace any plants that might have been grown out there in the countryside. So we haven't lost any food production capability, and yet we have more housing. Creative solutions here are I'm sure are everywhere. Or how about you have retail or business block as the first 3 stories or the top 3 stories, and turn the rest into condos. So your workers could live next to work, and it would be very convenient for them, and the boss doesn't have to pay for empty office space. Any thoughts on that?
Look, the more innovation, the better. Farms on top of roofs in industrial areas, on grocery stores. Why not? We've got to start thinking vertically for things other than just housing. So, sure, why not? The problem is, though, the agricultural land reserve is so structured and so bureaucratic, and basically it's almost a religion in there that every inch of farmland is this precious resource, and we can't let a single inch slip away, no matter how good the deal would be, no matter how important the issue is. That isn't healthy either. So, yeah, more innovation, let's try something.
When was the reserve made? In the 60s?
70s, 1970s.
In the 70s.
Bell bottom.
50 years ago. So I think technology for farming has improved a lot in the last 50 years. You can make more efficient use of the land. And as you said, put a garden on top of that building. So if the footprint of the building covered that land, well, I'm still producing just as much agriculturally. And yet these people have a home now, and their family has room to grow. And we also had a study done by, again, our real estate expert, Ross Kay. Canadians who have a backyard are healthier than Canadians who don't. And he gave, people are putting around in their garden. That's exercise. You have room to get away from everybody else in your own green space. Mentally, that's very beneficial. So if you have access to a backyard, you're actually healthier to neighbors who don't.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a website to check out, Jim. It's called discoversouthlands.ca. Southlands is a project in Tsawwassen, so Delta, BC, built by an incredible company called Century Group. And it's basically a mix of urban housing, so everything from multifamily to apartments. But it's based on a principle called agricultural urbanism. And essentially, it tries to have people living there, but also farming the land next to them. They have a farmer's market planned in the area. There'll be artisan shops. There's, the market square. There's all sorts of things that are designed to connect people to the farms where they get their food, and basically protect both. They're building new farm buildings. They have the natural open space and network trails and all the stuff that you love. But at the same time, connecting it to the farmland, making sure that, the housing exists to house people, yes, but also to give them an incredible community and to give them a way of life that kind of captures that life with a farm. So that's an innovative way. It's an innovative thing that took, decades for Delta to finally approve. But if it works, and I think it will, because it's an incredible development that they're, and a plan that they're unfolding there, it could be a model for other things in the ALR going forward.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, we're into budget season. Canada is going to have its first budget in over 2 years. No government under any circumstance in Canada has gone that long without a budget. Do you buy the excuses that we've heard for not having a budget?
Oh, no, the excuses are lame. Whether it's the federal government, the 2 years, and blaming it on COVID. Look, every other business on the planet managed to deal with COVID and still do their economic issues. Or if it's the BC government, claiming that they did delay for a couple of months because COVID slowed them down. No, the election slowed them down. It had nothing to do with COVID. But here's the number I want to give you, Jim. I can't believe I've brought up debtclock.ca, which is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation's debt clock. The Canadian federal debt right now is $1.1 trillion. And if you had told me that Canada would someday have $1 trillion debt, I would have been shocked. I would never have believed it. And yet there it is, 1.1 trillion, growing rapidly, and just flushing all that could work. It goes by $1 billion a day. It's crazy. So, we have to find a way to plot our way out of this, to get economic growth going in a fashion that then can create enough government revenue that can balance our books. I don't think anyone expects a balanced budget this year or next year, but what is the plan to get back to balance? Is it going to take 5 years, 7 years, 10 years? And how do we start paying back all this money that we've spent propping up the economy for the past year?
Now, of course, we have the Trudeau government saying this is all, because of COVID and it's good that there's relief and so on. But why would they fork over $200 million to Latin America for climate change? Look, Latin America is in the tropics. Climate change or not, it'll still be the tropics. No need to do anything there. They refused to give $30 million to the Canadian Football League to operate last year. No organization in Canada has probably done more for positive race relations than the CFL. They had the first black quarterback, the first black coach, the first black general manager. They still employ people from any racial background you can think of. Diversity is our strength. Those were the shirts that they were putting out a few years ago. Normie Kwong, running back for the Eskimos, Asian. That back in the 50s when they were still heavily prejudiced there. Why didn't they support for just $30 million an organization that has fostered calm, cool, collected racial harmony in Canada?
Well, I think because mainly rural people and suburban people supported it, and it's not the cool cause de célèbre of the urban elites, right? Like, if I'm guessing, but if you went through the BC Lions fan base, there'd be a higher percentage of people from Surrey, Langley, Abbotsford, Chilliwack than there would be from
people who voted
Vancouver.
Conservative.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, it's easy to ignore them. You make excellent points. On the other hand, you have an NDP government in British Columbia that didn't give a penny to help arts, culture, and tourism, or have given very little to help arts, culture, and tourism agencies. So it's perplexing. I'm not going to pretend to understand why governments do these things. But you're right. Look, the budget is coming. We have two budgets, the federal budget the 19th, the BC budget the 20th. We'll be looking for what they're planning to do with infrastructure, how they plan to control corporate taxes and red tape to make sure that they can start getting economic growth going again. We got to heat this economy up quickly, especially post-vaccination, in order to get enough money into the pie. The BC budget will be fascinating. Are they going to fund a Massey Tunnel? Are they going to fund the Taylor Bridge in the Peace River area? Those are projects that are desperately needed. But also, when are they going to bring back casinos? That's a huge cash cow for government that seems like it's been completely forgotten.
Hell, they could have ran a little parking lot bingo or something. Moved the slot machines out onto flatbed trailers with a canopy. Again, the lack of imagination for the people in government I find astounding. Sure,
and you're talking about, couple $1 billion that it contributes to the bottom line of the BC government, and they never even talk about it. So, we'll be looking at those numbers. We'll be looking at how they project housing starts to go, whether they plan to bring in more taxes on housing or not. I suspect they'll bring in a wealth tax, because that's what the NDP do, and that's what the Trudeau government generally does. That actually could hurt economic rebound because, it again pushes people to other jurisdictions in order to make more money. But we shall see. I mean, it'll all come down April 19th and 20th. It'll be 2 busy days of working through the numbers.
Does the new carbon tax kick in April 1st?
Yes, it does. Another increase there. Don't worry, MP raises also kick in on April 1st, so you're paying more for your government April 1st. You're also paying more in carbon tax in British Columbia.
Now, what do you think could help to encourage a rebound in our economy? And we do want instant. I mean, once a business dies, that building's probably going to stay empty for a year or two, perhaps never come back. Will people even be willing to risk their own money? Because if you're a small business, that's usually what it is. Your house is your surety for that loan. So will people even feel that they can risk something to start something up?
I hope so. That's a good question, right? What is the long-term effect of this pandemic on entrepreneurs? We've seen so many folks who, through no fault of their own, they've had great business plans, they had great location, great service, great product. They've gone out of business because the pandemic wouldn't let them continue on. What does that do for a culture of entrepreneurism, which wasn't terribly strong in Canada to begin with? Certainly not compared to what happens in the United States. Very important to do whatever it takes to incent people to start businesses, find a way to cut red tape to start it off, find a way to help in the first year of rent maybe. Look for ways to actually be supportive of small businesses starting up again in Canada, not just throwing your hands up and adding more red tape and more taxes and more hurdles to get through.
Well, you have city councils like Vancouver City Council that is officially against any further oil and gas exploration. And I'd like to ask the mayor, so you're saying petroleum needs to be stopped right now, at this very moment. Sir, do you have rubber soles on your shoes? Well, yes, I do. Take them off. That shirt you're wearing, is that a polyester cotton blend? Well, yes, it is. Polyester is a petroleum product. Take it off. What about your underwear? Well, that's a cotton polyester blend. Take that off. That computer on your desk, does it have a plastic casing? That's petroleum. Get rid of it. Your cell phone, there's 61 minerals in there. The mining industry needs to use oil and gas to power their equipment and to ship that stuff. Get rid of your cell phone. How much stuff do you think would be in his office after I finished?
Not much.
Yeah. So I mean, you gotta if you're gonna.
This has been the flaw. This has been the flaw in that thinking for a long time, right? Like, turn off natural gas, and but then how will people cook food or heat their homes, right? Like, this is why look, incremental change towards cleaner energy sources. Absolutely, I think we're all on board for that. Even the oil and gas industry is on board for that. But this idea that you could suddenly just shut it all down tomorrow. And everything would be fine. It would not. And there'd be a lot of naked, hungry, desperate people if that were the case.
Well, perhaps that's what he wants to see. Turn Vancouver into one large starving nudist colony.
That is an image I did not need to leave this podcast with.
Well, we did. You could start at Wreck Beach, I guess. Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman. He's the Vice President for Communications and Marketing for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in BC. His website, icba.ca. If you have any questions for Jordan or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @TalkDigitalNet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.